débat. The honourable member for Saskatoon-Grasswood.
Thank you again, Madam Speaker. I'm pleased to rise again in support of my colleague from Cloverdale, Langley City, the Bill C-374. I'd also like to add that I'm very pleased with the overall support of this legislation is getting from both sides of the House. This is actually very unusual for a private member's bill, but it's passed second reading with unanimous support. I would be remiss if I did not recognize we're on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people, since we are discussing inclusion and participation of Indigenous peoples on the Historic Sites and Monuments Board. I think it's very important that we recognize regularly the historic site that we are right now standing on. Bill C-374 seeks to amend the Historic Sites and Monument Act. The bill addresses the call to action number 79 from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's report. There are two further recommendations under the commemoration heading, however, that actually have not been discussed, Madam Speaker, in this bill. The mandate of the Historic Sites and Monuments Board of Canada is to advise the Government of Canada through the Minister of the Environment on the commemoration of the nationally significant aspects of Canada's history. Now, following a thorough evaluation process and recommendation by the board, the minister declares the site, the event, or person on the national historic significance. The board is composed of a representative from each province and territory with appointments up to 5 years and with the possibility of additional terms. There is also a librarian, an archivist of Canada, an officer of the Canadian Museum of History, and the Vice President of Parks Canada Heritage, Conservation and Commemoration Directorate, who also acts, by the way, as the board secretary. Presently, quorum sits at 10. So with this passage, Madam Speaker, of 374, that number would rise from 10 to 13. Madam Speaker, during the second reading debate on C-374, the author and the member from Cloverdale, Langley City said something that actually really struck with me. He said, as it stands today, Canada's historic designation system is outdated. Many past designations, along with the board compensation, are rooted in this country's colonial history. We should celebrate Canada's entire past. We should tell a broader, more inclusive, and more accurate story. He is absolutely correct, Madam Speaker. We cannot hope to achieve reconciliation if we continue to deny portions of our history. The three additional voices representative of our Indigenous population on the Historic Sites and Monuments Board will be a significant step in bringing new ideas and a fresh perspective to the board and a comprehensive history going forward. As I mentioned in my earlier remarks, Madam Speaker, my home province of Saskatchewan has many national historic sites, some of which are in my community of Saskatoon. I spoke about the Waugh Heritage Park, and I believe it's worth repeating here today that 240 hectares, there is 19 sites that represent the active and historical Society of Northern Plains people 6,000 years ago. Indigenous peoples from across the Northern Plains gathered here to hunt bison and also to gather food and herbs and to escape the winter winds. The story of Waugh is just beginning to be uncovered in my province of Saskatchewan. Another fine example of a national historic site in my own backyard is the Saskatoon Forestry Farm, Park and Zoo. The area, called the Sutherland Forest Nursery Station, played a vital role in the settlement and development of the prairies from the years 1913 to 1966. Shipping 147 million trees over that span of 50 years. The nursery supplied the northern part of the prairie provinces with an abundance of ash, along with maple, elm, and willow. When the nursery was closed, a portion of the site was reopened as the Forestry Farm Park by the City of Saskatoon in 1966. Designated a National Historic Site, The forestry farm continues to strengthen the roots of our community while providing an awe-inspiring landscape for the park and zoo. The zoo, by the way, is home to 300 animals, including 2 mobs of meerkats. Another National Historic Site right in our province, of course, would be the Legislative Building in Regina. Now, I've spoken about that earlier, Madam Speaker, in my remarks. I also mentioned its resemblance to where we are right now, because both buildings were built by the same Montreal company, Peter Lyle and Sons Construction Limited, and the fine craftsmen that he employed back then, not only for the City of Regina, the legislative buildings, but of course the House of Commons here in Ottawa. Both buildings are truly beautiful, and I know we're going to have at least a 10-year shutdown here of the House of Commons to refurbish it, but I would encourage anyone visiting Ottawa or Regina to tour them quickly and get to know 2 of our most beautiful sites in this country. Madam Speaker, I've served on the Canadian Heritage Committee. I currently sit on the Indigenous and Northern Affairs Committee. My experience on both committees, along with the opportunity recently to tour communities in Nunavut with Senator Dennis Patterson for a week this spring, have given me a pretty good perspective on what we can do to bring a much more inclusive attitude to our non-Indigenous population. Thank you, Madam Speaker.